Hello, y'all. Thanks for tuning in to our Southern Four-Wheel Drive Association TechNet discussion. Southern continues to focus on conservation, recreation, and education. So if you like information on those subjects, go visit our webpage, https://www.sfwda.org. This evening, Mike Morrison of Morrison Outdoor Adventures is going to discuss recovery gear and rigging. I have some instructions for how we're going to work tonight, okay? So if you have a question, put the question in comments. Preface your question with a capital Q. That'll make it stand out to me, and I can pick them out when we get to the questions and answer session, okay? By commenting, hello, everyone, at any time during this live stream tonight, right this second if you wanted to, you'll be registered to win a Carhartt backpack. They're really neat backpacks. You get your choice in colors between black and this tan beige color that's on the screen. And like most of you guys, I need a new set of tires. So to be eligible to win a new set of tires this fall, I need to enter in comments, as you do too. I need BFG tires. Just as you see it on the screen there, I need BFG tires in the comments during the live stream. And then I'll filter through those, and everyone that enters that as a comment gets entered into a drawing that's going to be held at Dixie Run, which is in the first week of October. You don't have to be present to win. And see, Jeremy's already put in here. Look at this, y'all. Jeremy says he needs BFG tires. He did it exactly right. So Mike Morrison and his wife, Sarah, own and operate Morrison Outdoor Adventures. Mike is a certified I4WDA, and Mike's going to tell you what that means when he gets on the screen in just a minute. He's a certified I4WDA instructor and a master tread trainer. Mike's also the co-educational director, along with myself, for Southern Four-Wheel Drive Association. Mike's got years of experience, and he's going to share some of that with us this evening. So, without saying much more, we've got a good many people on already, so I'm going to turn it over to Mike.
And I've been doing four-wheel drive training with military groups, recreational groups, and commercial groups for the past 9 years, and full-time as my full-time job for the past 4 years. Four-wheel drive was always kind of a passion of mine. Did it growing up, and of course in high school, nobody told me that I could be a four-wheel drive trainer. So at career day, when I found out that I could, I kind of developed a passion for it. Worked with Scott Fields from UARI Off-Road Training Center for a number of years, and he mentored me from there until I became a full-fledged trainer, and I worked with him up until he sold his business. And then I worked with Overland Experts for a number of years as their director of recreational training. And then just recently, my wife and I started Morrison's Outdoor Adventures. We both have a passion for being outdoors. We have two young boys, soon to be 11, and the other one is 7. And we really enjoy getting them outdoors. So we started this business because we saw the difference that made in our family, and we wanted to help other families reconnect through the outdoors. So we do all types of classes, not just four-wheel drive stuff. We do outdoor classes and skills trainings, events, four-wheel drive events, all types of stuff all over the country. We are not really necessarily based anywhere. We are from North Carolina, but we live in an RV. We are a full-time RV family. So we travel the country, or we're planning to up until the COVID pandemic. So that's a little bit of backstory, but let's jump right into it. Today, we're going to talk about recovery gear, and we're going to talk about some rigging. It's going to be really basic, but with this, the main goal of this is to kind of show you what is commonplace on the market today, what are some of the best pieces of gear on the market today, and how to use them properly, or how to choose the best piece of kit. So I've got some stuff here with me. Al also has some pictures that he's going to throw up as we talk about stuff so that I don't have to zoom up close to the camera. But let's go ahead and get started. And we'll start with kind of the most basic piece of equipment that we have. And that's a strap. So tons of straps out there on the market. How do you choose the best one? So with a strap, there's some things that we are looking for. Nice heavy duty straps, right? Typically, we use these as tree protectors on winching exercises. We can also do what we call a static or traction extraction with them, meaning that we're not applying any kinetic energy to it. But these straps that we're choosing from at this point in time typically have less than 2 to 3% stretch, sometimes a little bit more depending on the fibers and how they're constructed, but very little stretch in them. Now, when we're choosing a strap, what we want to look for is right here where it's sewn together, the stitching. We want stitching that runs parallel to the strap. We want to stay away from the ones that have stitching that runs perpendicular back and forth. That's a weaker type of stitching. The other thing that we're looking for, notice 3 inches wide, right? Minimum of 3 inches wide, especially here on the East Coast, to use as a tree protector, because anything narrower than 3 inches wide can start to strip the bark away from trees. So we want to stay a minimum of 3 inches wide. Now, lengthwise, there's a lot of arguments back and forth. Me personally, I like to stay between 6 and 10 feet for my straps. I don't really want anything longer because then I have to store it. And if I want to rig it as a tree strap, I have a whole lot of extra that I have to deal with. So I like to keep them between 6 and 10 feet. The other thing that I look for is, if you notice, the eye here is not 3 inches wide. It is actually a folded eye. So they actually fold the strap in half and sew it so that it's thicker here in the eye section. This is from the overhead lifting industry, right? They call it an eye-to-eye sling because it has an eye on both ends and they're both folded. The reason they fold them is because this is where the most wear and tear on your strap comes from. They do have ones that are twisted and they do have ones that are flat like this one. So that's personal preference, but I prefer the flat. They're a little bit easier to work with. Now, with the folded, you're going to find it's easier to work with your attachment points just because it's narrower. It's not the full 3 inches wide. The other thing you want to stay away from with straps is like your Walmart straps that have hooks sewn into them. Those are not to be considered recovery straps or recovery ropes. They are just for basic towing, if even that. I wouldn't really recommend them for that. We don't want to see really anything sewn into the eye of our straps. We want to keep them nice and soft with nothing attached to them so we can make our own attachment points out of them. So the other thing we're looking for when we choose a strap, it's all about the rating of the strap, right? And Al's going to pull up picture 1 of the rating on the strap for me here. And once we get that pulled up, then we'll talk about that a little bit and the different ways that we can rig these straps. But you can see also with this particular strap that there is a protective covering for whatever we wrap it around. If we have to wrap it around a tree that has some abrasive bark and things like that, it does help protect it. All right, so ratings. What you see in front of you right here, this is a typical patch that's sewn into straps that are used in the overhead lifting industry. These are rated straps, right? They've been pull tested to destruction to find the best rating for them. We're going to cover some things on it, but the first thing that I want you to kind of look at here, it says MTS 46,500 pounds. What does that mean? That MTS stands for minimum tensile strength. Be careful because different companies rate their straps in different ways. If you see other terms like ABS or ATS, that's when we have to be concerned, because ABS means average braking strength or average tensile strength, meaning exactly that. that's the average when it was pull tested of where it broke at. Sometimes it breaks below that, sometimes it breaks above that. We're really looking for MTS or WLL, which is working load limit, because those are the design factors that we're looking for, or the terminology that we're looking for. The other thing about a tree strap that we want to look for is the higher the rating, the better, right? We really want to look for it to be somewhere around this 46,000 mark if possible, because based on how we rig it, that determines its actual strength. So if you look right above that also, you'll see it says 5-to-1 design factor. What that means is that minimum tensile strength, basically 5 times that, is the breaking strength of this strap. So the breaking strength is where this strap completely failed when it was pull tested. So it's a safety factor. It's meant to keep you safe, and most of our recovery gear is designed with that safety factor in mind. All right, moving down, we see vertical, choker, and basket, okay? These are the types of ways that we can rig this strap. Vertical is not as important to us, not so much, a little bit, but we're not necessarily lifting things vertical, right? The most important one that we're looking at is basket, because the basket is typically how we rig a tree strap in an eye-to-eye configuration. It wraps around the tree and the two eyes come back together. And you notice that's also where this strap has the most strength of 18,600 pounds. So that's the most common and the safest way to rig our tree strap, is in a basket configuration. The next configuration we see is a choker. This is a way that we can rig our tree straps, and it does have some benefits, but notice the reduction in weight capacity, right? More than half of the capacity of the strap is gone. Reason being is because now we are only relying on one leg of the strap, right? Versus a basket where we're relying on 2 legs of the strap. The other reason is because we're rigging it through the eye of the strap, there's going to be some strength loss. Now, one thing to pay attention to with the choker is notice how it comes straight through the eye. It doesn't circle back around in the center. That has to be as straight as possible to maintain that strength. The benefits to a choker is maybe we have to rig the winch line higher up on a tree. We can do that with a choker because now we can pull it tight and we don't have to worry about it slipping back down the tree. The other benefit would be is maybe when we pulled our winch line out, we came up just short, maybe a foot or two short of our connection point. Rigging it as a choker actually gives us a little bit more length. Not a ton, but a little bit more length. Now, the vertical, that is somewhat similar to horizontal, right? Pulling straight if we had to hook up to another vehicle to do a traction extraction. But notice again, we're only relying on one leg, so it is reduced half of what the basket configuration is. And this is very important when we think about rigging up to other vehicles, how strong these straps really are. So that's basic rigging of straps. You can see when you choose a strap, what you are looking for is some type of rating system sewn into it. These are typically the best because they give you the best type of ratings and how they can be rigged, but sometimes they can be just sewn in as a tag in the crotch of the eye right here, and they'll give you a weight rating. But a lot of times it's just going to be a simple weight rating of, hey, this strap's good to X number. So be careful. Again, make sure that you're buying from quality companies. All right, so we're going to move on to the next piece of kit here. Or actually, before I move on, Al, if you'll go to picture 2 of the 2 straps connected for me. Picture 2 here, we're going to talk about how to connect straps, right? And with connecting straps, this is where there is some different information out there, and it depends on the situation you're in, how you rig them. But I'm not necessarily going to talk about what we're using to rig them, but I'm going to talk about how to connect the straps. Al's throwing a picture up here. This is the first way that typically we will connect a strap. Sarah, will you grab that Delron, that black toggle out of there? This is what we call the handshake method, like the old gladiator handshakes, right? Or trapeze artists, how they grab each other when they're swinging back and forth because of its strength. So this is a good way, typically a soft way, what we consider a soft way to connect straps. Basically, you feed through one eye of the strap, and then you feed back through the other eye, the opposite eye of the other strap, bringing them together. The key to this is that you need some type of toggle to go in there so your straps don't tighten down and become one strap. If you do this without a toggle, it's going to become one strap and you're going to have a ton of strength loss. So you're going to lose a lot in that strap, and basically you should just throw it away at that point in time. But if you put a toggle in there, once it tightens down, you can make your pull. Then you can wiggle this toggle back and forth, and it'll help separate that, and then you can pull it back apart again. So that's one method of connecting it, and I'll get Al to show a little bit more of a blown up view here on picture 3, Al, of just the strap without the toggle, and he'll bring that up. But this just shows kind of how the two straps are going together without the toggle in place before it's tightened down. Now, the next method for connecting it is, and now you can go to picture 4 of the soft shackle in place now. So the next picture we've got here is soft shackle, right? These are relatively new to the industry. I say new. They've been out for probably about 6-7 years now, maybe even a little longer. We got these from the sailing industry, and I'll cover these more in depth in a minute. But when we're connecting straps, such as this picture shows here, this is an optimal way to connect the strap. Reason being is again, it's completely soft rigging. Oh, I see we got a question of what else can be used as a toggle. So different toggles, you can use any type of hardwood. And typically stay away from just picking something up out of the forest to use, because it could be rotten. It could come apart. But what I did before somebody came out with this particular one right here is I went and bought an axe handle or a shovel handle, and I just cut it down into 12-inch sections. And that's what I used as a toggle. You can, in a pinch, use a nice thick rolled up magazine, but it's not going to hold as well as a good hardwood toggle. So that's a good option. Someone else asked, without a toggle stick, will a shackle clevis work as well? We'll get to that in just a second. So, but that's an excellent question. But soft shackles, we prefer using them to connect straps this way because they are soft, right? If something happens, something breaks, we're not adding anything metal or hard into the equation. Also, they are great connection points here because they keep any type of friction or anything out of the recovery. Now, in a minute, we'll talk about rigging soft shackles properly, and this is where the arguments will come in, but we'll get to that in a minute. All right, Al, if you will go to picture 5. All right, so picture 5, bow shackles. All right, bow shackles have been around for a long time, but they are an optimal way to connect straps together. So these bow shackles, a lot of people call them D-rings, right? But there is a difference. A bow shackle bows out here. A D-ring is actually straight up and down. Bow shackles are designed for straps, where a D-ring is designed for a chain, typically. So again, comes from the overhead lifting industry, heavy, metal, and we call this a screw pin bow shackle because the pin actually screws in and out. Now, before I go too much further into explaining these, this is a way that you can connect straps and make connections together. Downside to that is, and where you've got to kind of be careful, is the weight. We add this into a recovery. Now we've got something that weighs 5 or 6 pounds that could come loose and becomes a flying projectile. Very, very dangerous, right? This will go through windshields, grills, tailgates, people, seats, you name it, it's probably going to go through it. So good thing is, if you choose the right one, they are very, very strong. Now, I only recommend attaching 2 straps together if you're doing a static recovery, meaning it's just a traction extraction. We're not snatching or adding any type of kinetic attachment, right? We're not using a kinetic rope or anything that has stretch in the equation. So, all right, let's talk a little bit about, and you can go ahead and take that picture down now, Al. Thank you very much. But let's talk a little bit about choosing the right bow shackle and the right soft shackle to make connection points. We'll start with bow shackles. What we're looking for with bow shackles here is we want them to be rated, right? Now, be careful, because not all bow shackles are created equally or even rated equally, just like our soft shackles. I only buy about three different brands of bow shackles. There are other good ones out there, but I typically only buy ones that come from an overhead lifting rigging company like Gunnabow. This particular one's Van Beest. You can see it's got a green pin right there, sort of where it's not worn out. Crosby is another one. There are several out there. I will use like ARBs and a couple other companies. But the reason that is because if you called up, say, Van Beest and said, hey, I need some recovery bow shackles, they'd say, you need what? Because they make them for the overhead lifting industry. These are pull tested to destruction, and they pull test a certain number out of every batch. Super important, right? Versus a company out of wherever that only pull test 1 out of every 2,000 that they make. So they're going to pull test quite a few more. Also, out of every batch they make, they put a serial number on them. Okay, I don't know if you can really see that, but that serial number is there because if this fails, they can go back and they can pull all those off the shelf or where they sold them to and figure out why they failed. So now, if Al, you will bring up picture 6 of the rating on a bow shackle for me. But the way these are typically rated, it's going to have a WLL, then a number, and a T. What that means is working load limit, then the number, and then tons, right? So 3/4 inch bow shackle is typically rated to 4.75 tons, right? 4.75 tons. Now that's a working load limit. Again, there's a design factor in place. A screw pin bow shackle from Van Beest, I believe the actual breaking strength is over 62,000 some odd pounds. So it's quite a bit more, right? Now, that doesn't mean that we necessarily want to load them that much, but we want to stay within kind of that working load limit range. Now, how do we use bow shackles? Typically, if we're using them, say, when we're rigging with a winch, our strap always goes on the bow, right? Because that's why this bow portion is here, so the strap can come down, go around a tree, and back up, and the eye can sit nice and steady there. And we put the hook on the pin, okay? And normally this is going to sit flat, kind of like this, and we always hook up with the opening from the hook facing up, not with the opening of the hook facing down. So the reason for that is if the hook breaks, then it forces it to the ground instead of forcing it up and out towards the vehicle or people. The other thing we want to remember, we only use screw pin bow shackles. We don't use ones that have the little clips here, because if they do get side loaded, they will separate and come apart a whole lot easier. Also with a screw pin bow shackle, right? Remember, don't be a screw up, screw down. Notice here, when I put the screw in, because I'm screwing down into place, it's held in there, versus if I do it this way, right, and it falls out. If I'm in a mud hole and I'm screwing up right here and I drop this, now I got a paperweight. So always rig it this way, drops in, it's held in place. I screw the pin down and shoulder it, right? So I shoulder it and I back just 1/4 of a turn off, okay? The reason being is during the recovery, this is going to move up and down, and it can tighten down on itself, right? And once it tightens down too hard, you're not getting it back apart without tools, or possibly you're cutting your strap to get it off the tree. So keep that in mind, that quarter turn to back off of it. Some people don't teach the quarter turn. Some people do. If you have a tool in place, they have a specific riggers tool that they can kind of unlatch these or unscrew them, untighten them. If you have something similar to that, you can tighten them down all the way, but they can get very, very, very tight and very hard to get off. So if you've got them hanging on the front of your Jeep and you don't want anybody to steal them, get you a screwdriver or something round, stick it through there and romp down on them. They're never going to get those suckers back off. Just remember that you've got to get them back off when you got to do a recovery. But again, only use in static recoveries. Do not use in kinetic recoveries unless it's your only option, right? Because again, heavy, this comes flying at you. You're probably not going to feel it, so I can't say that it'll hurt, but it's going to do some serious damage. The next piece of kit that we have here is a soft shackle. And Al, if you will go to picture 7 of the tag of the soft shackle for me, please. But soft shackles, we got them from the sailing industry and have adapted them to the off-road recovery, even though we like to say, us off-roaders came up with these. Well, not quite. So it's made out of the same fabric as your synthetic winch line, right? So it is Dyneema fabric. Also, there are different ways to rig this. Be careful, because there is not, like bow shackles, there's not really an industry standard for these yet. So be careful. Once Al he's got the picture up there, but we want one that has that rating sewn into it. Again, all about having that rating on the soft shackle. If you don't have a rating on it, how do you know how well that's going to hold up in a recovery? And even though it's soft, it can still hurt quite a bit and do some serious damage. The other thing about it is there are different ways that people tie them. You notice here, this one has 2 legs to it, right? This is a 2-leg construction. This is actually one of the stronger constructions of soft shackles. There are other ones that just have 1 leg that goes around, and the knots can also be tied differently. So pay attention. Now here's where the arguments come in. Notice this one has some green on it right here. This is based on the manufacturer, how they recommend to rig this particular soft shackle is to hook up where the green is, okay? So with that, hooking up where the green is, notice how my knot is. It's always up here up top. It's nice and straight up through the loop, okay? The loop here that goes over it and pulls and cinches down tight, it stays nice and straight. Some companies recommend doing this, but notice how I start to get a bend in the knot there, and when I pull tighter, the more it's going to bend. Also, we run the risk, if we don't cinch it down enough, of it popping loose. So recommendation that I always give people is to rig like this, and there are other people in the industry that teach other ways, but this is what I found myself to be the best way to rig, where you get the best strength and less chance. I've never seen one pop off when it's been rigged in this configuration. So now let's take a look at the rigging tab that Al has pulled up here. We got a question, which soft shackle brand to use? So there are some good companies out there making them. I use this particular one that you see the picture of is Safe Extract, and you can buy that. I'll get the website here in just a minute. Also, ARB soft shackle is the older style design, but it's very good. There is Treaty Oak Off-Roads, another good one that makes some good soft shackles I've used before. I have used a couple other brands out there, but I try to stay away from any ones that don't have a rating on them. So that's what I'm looking for, and I try to find ones that have this 2-leg design if I can. If not, then I'll make sure that I get one that does have the rating on it like ARB's does. Good question, though. All right. So looking at the rating here, very similar, right? We see what it's rated at with that MTS, that minimum tensile strength. Staying away, again, from that average braking strength, that ABS or average tensile strength. So with that average load, again, it breaks sometimes below this number, sometimes it breaks above this number, but we're going to put it in the middle. Stay away from that. We want to know the minimum tensile strength or the minimum breaking strength, MBS, of what this breaks at. Or sometimes a working load limit will be put on these as well. But look at what this is rated to, 47,000 pounds, right? Very, very strong, very strong. These are typically what I recommend using in kinetic recoveries if you can, okay? If you can use these in kinetic recoveries, it's much safer because it's soft. Now, if you have sharp recovery points on your Jeep or Toyota or off-road vehicle, then you want to stay away from using these because just like your synthetic winch line, they are susceptible to abrasion. They can get cut. So looking for recovery points that actually have a beveled edge on them, and not many bumper manufacturers in the industry do this, but you can go in and kind of round the edges of your recovery points with a file or a Dremel tool, as long as you're not taking away too much meat from them. But we want a rounded edge to rig this to, versus this will hold up to any type of recovery point, whether it's a sharp edge. So I will still use this in a kinetic recovery, but if that's my only option, this is what I'm using. All right, let's talk about some different gear for a little bit. What's some different gear out there that we can use if we get stuck? Now, one thing that I throw into a recovery kit just as much as anything is some type of way to deflate my tires. And everybody's like, well, you do that right when you get to the trail, right? I do. But I look at tire PSI as a variable. We got another question here. Same cleaning and maintenance for the soft shackle as you would for synthetic rope? Most definitely. Yes, you'll clean it the exact same way. And when we talk about synthetic winch line here in a minute, we'll actually talk about the best way to clean it. So keep that in mind. We've got another question right after that. Does sunbake lessen the strength of recovery equipment? It does, to a certain extent, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, and that's another good question, but not anywhere near what we think it does. A lot of people really think synthetic winch line is absolutely positively cannot be out in the sun for any amount of time, which is incorrect. The color of your synthetic winch line is actually the UV protectant. So keep that in mind. All right, so next piece of recovery gear that I carry is a way to deflate my tires. Reason being is because I think of tire pressure as a variable. I don't run the same PSI in my tires as I do when I'm on rocks versus sand, right? Or mud versus sand. I run a much lower PSI in sand and mud than I do on rocks. I keep a little bit higher PSI in the rocks to protect the sidewall of my tires. But not every trail is just all rocks or all sand or all mud. So if I get to a section, maybe I get stuck in some sand. The very first thing I do, even if I walk up on somebody stuck in sand, is I grab a way to deflate tires, and I'm going to go ahead and check their tire pressure and let a little bit of air out. Okay. I use this particular one by ARB because it's digital and I can adjust it. And I get a very, very accurate reading. There are other ones out there, such as these preset ones, right, that you can get, like this one right here that a lot of people use. I stay away from those. Not that they're bad, but because they're preset, and I like to change my tire pressure quite a bit based on terrain, load, and things like that, I don't want to set tire pressure. So I use this and I can adjust my tire pressure. So I'll walk up to the vehicle and immediately start letting air out of the tires if it's too high. So I consider this a piece of recovery equipment. The next piece of recovery equipment that I'm carrying no matter what, along with my straps and soft shackles and bow shackles, is some type of shovel, right? Now I'm not going to get too much into this, but this is probably one of the most overlooked types of recovery equipment. Maybe it's not going to recover your vehicle, but one thing it most certainly will do is lessen the resistance of when you're pulling against the vehicle. If I'm stuck in mud and I got a bunch of mud or even sand built up in front of the tires, I can take that shovel and I can pull that out of the way so that the recovery is not going to take anywhere near the effort, and I'm going to reduce the chance of damage or destruction. Awesome. We do have another question here. Ordered a soft shackle off customsplice.com that's rated for a 10,000 pound winch. How does that compare to others? That's a good question. I have not seen one rated in that way. The reason I would struggle with that is that particular type of rating is what's their qualification for being rated for a 10,000 pound winch? Does it mean that soft shackle's rated 10,000 pounds? Is it rated to 1.5 times the weight of the winch, or is it double the weight of the winch? So I would stay away from that type of rating unless I knew exactly how that particular company was rating that. And I would look for it to be at least double the winch capacity, if not more. So if I had a 10,000 pound winch, I really want one that's over 20,000 pounds if I can get my hands on it. And it's relatively easy these days. So, all right, moving forward, some other pieces of kit and gear that I carry. I always carry what we call a hitch link. Okay, this particular one is factor 55. And here in a minute, when we talk about connecting to vehicles, this right here can go into the receiver hitch or tow hitch of your vehicle. This is a very, very important piece of kit to carry because the tow hitch on the rear of your vehicle is probably one of the best, especially if it was installed from the factory, one of the best recovery points in the rear that you have because it's tied to both frame rails of your vehicle, so it distributes the load better. Just make sure the company that you order from, Factor 55, they have good products, right? But it's been pull tested. Don't get these ones from Harbor Freight or Tractor Supply that are hollow, or the ends is just 2 pieces of flat steel welded on there. The other thing to carry with you is a good rated hitch pin so that you can make the connection and hold this in place. Now, some people will say to take a strap and feed it into the hitch of your vehicle, right? And put your hitch pin through it. This is very old school. Would it work in a pinch? Yes. Is it good? No. Reason being is these hitch pins are rated to shear capacity, not actual pull strength. So they need material all the way to the edge, right? And we all know how hard it is to remove like a Reese hitch or something from our receiver hitch of our vehicle. So it's not actually the pin that's holding most of the load. It's the friction on the sides. So if we put a strap on this, it's going to bend, and you're going to say a lot of bad words trying to get this thing out because it'll bend in place, or it could potentially fail. The other thing is if we have to pull at any type of angle, now our strap is going to get cut on the edge of the receiver of our vehicle. So keep that in mind. Carry one of these little receiver hitch things. All right. I got my Southern 4-wheel drive cup right here. What is the best way to look at the rating / math of when to use a snatch block? Very, very good question. Not to jump too far ahead, but we will be talking about that here in just a minute, kind of when to use snatch blocks and when are they the most beneficial. But again, an excellent question, and we'll get to that right after this next piece of kit. I don't want to jump too far ahead. All right, let's talk about synthetic winch line real fast. Synthetic winch line, it's been around a while. And kind of get back to the old question, talking about sun on these. You want to be careful with these, with environmental factors, but it's not as important as people think it is. But synthetic winch line is kind of the latest and greatest type of winch line, even though it's been out a while. It's much safer. It's also much more lightweight than the old school cable, right? Very lightweight. But with this, the number one reason that I carry this particular piece of equipment is because this is 100% field repairable, meaning I can fix this in the field if it breaks. Where steel cable, I cannot make a permanent repair to this. This I can. So super important to think about. Same way that they make it from the factory, it's just spliced into itself here. I can re-splice this in the field if it happened to break or get a cut in it or something like that. Now, steel cable, very old school, it's heavy. The benefits to it, less abrasion resistant, right? So you can lay it over a sharp rock or lay it on the ground and it's not going to get cut. But because of that abrasion resistance, the other reason is it's also got what they call a right hand lay, meaning it twists to the right, or a left hand lay where it twists to the left. When it unwinds, or when it pulls tight, it actually unwinds and uncurls. That's what makes it so dangerous, because when it breaks, it whips, right? So this has what we call a neutral braid. It's a 12-strand neutral braid. So as this gets pulled tight, it has no twist to it. It also has less stretch than your steel cable. So less stored energy in this in a recovery. But it doesn't have anywhere near the abrasion resistance of steel cable. Environmental factors, though, a lot of people say steel cable is safer in the environment. Metal rust, right? So metal rust, and I've seen a lot of steel cables that were pretty rusty and I wouldn't use it. So keep that in mind. And I see someone saying steel cables can be repaired. As that same, just a note, you can repair steel cables, but you can't do it in the field. You have to have a swedge to make a permanent repair, just like they make from the factory, and you have to have the large press to be able to put that back together. You can make temporary repairs, but a lot of times that requires connectors to put them together, and they will not feed through your roller fair lead or your Haas fair lead. What sort of sleeve should be used to overcome abrasions with synthetics? A question we just had come up. I actually don't use any. I don't use a permanent sleeve on these. So the key there is I use one of those Velcro sleeves that I can take on and off, because those sleeves become a pain. I know like Master Pull and a couple other companies have the Velcro sleeves you can take on and off. The permanent ones just get bunched up, they get wet, they hold moisture, and they become a pain. So you can get one of those that just wraps around, or if you've got some place that it's laying across something you're worried about, throw a floor mat under it so that it can kind of go over top of that floor mat, and that'll help a ton. Now, going back to environmental, with environmental, steel cable rust, right? I've seen a lot of steel cables that were rusty and I would not use them, versus synthetic winch line, right? It does not rust, but UV wise, there is some degradation in this, but again, the coloring in this is actually the UV protectant. So whether it's pink, orange, purple, green, yellow, whatever, that is the UV protectant. I've had synthetic winch line on the front of vehicles for 6-7 years, out in the sun, and used it every day in trainings, and never had a failure in it. The big thing we want to think about, not necessarily environmental factor of sun, is a couple of things. Number one, if this gets wet and we cover it with something like a neoprene cover and it can't breathe, it will mildew and start to rot, taking away from the strength. The other thing about it that we want to be careful of is the abrasion resistance. If it gets in mud or sand and it gets in between these fibers here, okay, and as these fibers move back and forth, it can start to wear it out. So we want to make sure after every trip that we take care and clean our synthetic winch lines. All of our gear, really, soft shackles, this, our straps, any type of soft gear, we want to clean it. But how do we do that, right? What I do, well, let me tell you what to stay away from first, is we don't want any high pressure water. We also don't want any type of abrasive soaps or chemicals, right, to clean this. I know I always pick on kind of overlanders a little bit. I know us overlanders want our nice, pretty winch lines to be nice and clean. I'm an overlander. I can pick on it. But we don't want to use any abrasive chemicals, right? So at most, a mild dish soap, if anything. Stay away from like spraying it with a water nozzle or something like that, or a power washer. What I do is I put a 5-gallon bucket in front of my vehicle and I start pulling this off the winch, and I put it in the bucket and I just work it back and forth and kind of open and close those fibers to wash it out. And then I leave it laid out straight in a driveway or wherever to dry out. And once it's dry, then I rewind it back up. And I probably do that if I use a winch, 10 times in a month, I may do it every other month just to get it clean. Or if I happen to get it in some mud or some sand, I'll take it home and clean it. So it's not something that I do all the time. Same thing with your straps, right? You can use a light bristle brush to help clean them, but try to stay away from using too much scrubbing back and forth, because we don't want to damage the fibers too much, but they're pretty resilient. So that's the best way to kind of take care of any of your soft gear. All right. So, we had the question about when to use pulley blocks or snatch blocks, as some people call them. There is actually a difference between a snatch block and a pulley block. Pulley block is typically what we use in our recoveries, and a pulley block has to be disconnected from the anchor to open it and feed your cable or your synthetic winch line through. Then it can be closed, the cheeks are slid back together and attached back to the anchor point. Excuse me. A snatch block, you can actually disconnect from the anchor point, or sorry, you don't have to disconnect from the anchor point in order to rig your line through there, your cable or your synthetic winch line. Now, this is another piece of kit, metal, heavy, but this is a super important piece of kit. Lots of different uses with pulley blocks that we can get into, and I'll get into those in a minute. But when we're picking out a pulley block for our vehicle, we want it to be rated a minimum of double our winch capacity. So if we have a 10,000 pound winch, we want it to be rated to a minimum of 20,000 pounds. Maybe you guys can see on there, the rating on this, it says 20,000 pounds, right? So they're going to be rated working load limit, okay? You can see with this ARB one I got right here, 20,000 pounds. It's backwards and upside down, but 20,000 pounds. So this would be what I would use with a 10,000 pound winch. Maybe squeeze it up to a 12,000 pounds winch if I had to in a pinch, but I probably wouldn't go much higher than that if the vehicle was really stuck. So what do we use pulley blocks for? Pulley blocks can do several things. If we have an anchor point, maybe that is too far away, or maybe the anchor point that's in front of us is kind of weak, so we want to try to split the load between other anchor points, we can do what we call a redirect, where we actually run the winch line through here, then we can angle it in any direction again. So a redirect is one of the most common uses of this. But with a redirect, there is no change in the pulling capacity or how the winch is pulling the load. The other way that we can potentially use a pulley block is to, some people will say, double the pulley power of our winch, but we're not actually doubling the pulling capacity of the winch. We're splitting the load in half. So the pulley block takes the load. For instance, if I have a 20,000 pound load that I'm trying to move, my vehicle's stuck and it's going to take 20,000 pounds to move. Well, I've got my two legs coming down here, synthetic rope, synthetic rope. This one's only got 10,000 pounds on it, and this one only has 10,000 pounds on it. Goes back and forth a little bit, but it splits the load so that the line going into the winch is only having to pull 10,000 pounds. But this pulley block and your anchor point, your strap and everything else from this point up is having to hold the full 20,000 pounds. That's why I double our winch capacity. It's also why our soft shackles, bow shackles, and straps have to be rated so high. So keep that in mind when you're selecting your pulley block as far as the rating. I see vehicle size is also a key component to the block rating needed. Comparing a Toyota Land Cruiser to a Jeep TJ. Yes, you are correct. Reason I say rate it by the winch is because if you're getting a heavier vehicle like a Toyota Land Cruiser, which is when they're up armored, rigged, all our camping gear, they're probably gonna be closer to 7,000 pounds versus 5,000 or 6,000 pounds for a Jeep. You're gonna have a heavier winch on there anyway. If you have a lighter winch on there, then you're probably under rigged anyway, and you can't put the pulling power on this particular piece of product to destroy it. So that's kind of why we say choose and buy the winch on the vehicle. And we recommend, some people will say buy a winch that's 1.5 times the weight of your vehicle. I recommend getting a winch that's double the weight of your vehicle, and not the weight that's on the door jamb, the actual weight with all your gear, all your armor and everything on it. So you may need to go get your vehicle weight. So pulley blocks, not all created equal, not just in the rating though. Now you'll find with pulley blocks that there's several different types of rollers that you can get with pulley blocks. Reason being is sometimes the pulley block can be metal, or it can be what they use like a Delron material or some type of polymer material. The Delron material or the polymer material is specifically for synthetic winch line. So the synthetic winch line is not going to destroy this, whereas a steel cable running through there could potentially start to destroy this polymer material. The metal is for either. You can use steel cable or synthetic winch line with metal rollers, but don't mix them, because the metal still cuts grooves in there that could possibly pick and pull at your synthetic winch line as it goes through. So don't use one with steel cable and then swap it over and use it with synthetic winch line. Just 1 second. I think Al had some issues. All right. I think Al's computer crashed on him, so hopefully the live's still going good. It looks like it is. So we will continue. I'm going to see if possibly my wife could call Al for me and check to make sure everything's okay. But we'll continue moving on. Also, when choosing a good pulley block, you see this particular one. How it has beveled edges right here at the connection point. This is because you can use that with a soft shackle. Notice on this particular one how it has sharp edges. You cannot use a soft shackle with that particular piece of kit, okay? So, yeah, we got Al on there now. Okay, I think we're still good, Al. Thumbs up if we're still good to go. But not using soft shackles, use bow shackles with that particular piece of kit. So keep that in mind. All right, so that is that particular piece of kit. Next piece of thing I want to talk about here is kinetic ropes, right? We're going to start talking about kinetic recoveries. Most everything that we've talked about to this point is what we use in static recoveries. Reason we say Al's going to try to reconnect, so if for some reason we get kicked off, we'll jump right back on and try again. But reason we use all that in static is because everything we've talked about is either heavy or has little to no stretch. When we do kinetic recoveries, those tend to want a little bit of stretch in them, right? Because we're adding a lot more force to them with our vehicles. Now, kinetic ropes come from the shipping industry again. This is what they use with tugboats and mooring large ships at port, because as the tide comes in, these can stretch. Then as the tide goes back out, they can shrink back down. They have typically about 30% stretch to them, right? So that 30% stretch is what we want when we do our kinetic recoveries. That 30% will absorb that initial shock load and impact and transfer that back to the stuck vehicle. Okay, but that's also where the danger comes from, because with that, if something comes loose, say a bow shackle, it's moving fast. And it can do a lot of damage, right? So a bow shackle, potentially in a kinetic recovery, if it comes loose or fails, can be moving 3 to 5 times the speed of a .357 Magnum bullet, and it weighs a whole lot more. It's going to hurt. So again, in kinetic recoveries, we're trying to keep it as soft as possible with soft shackles and things like that. When we're choosing a kinetic rope for our vehicle, again, we want our weight ratings on there, but we want to get one that's rated roughly about 4 to 5 times the weight of our vehicle, okay? And they're typically rated by the diameter, 7/8 inch, 1.25 inch. But a lot of people say, bigger's better. Bigger is not better, right? If it's too big and rated to too much, our little vehicle is not going to be able to get the stretch out of it. So we want to get one 4 to 5 times the weight of our vehicle. Keep that in mind. This particular one is a 7/8, so minimum tensile strength, 28,300 pounds, right? So it is, again, a very good piece of kit. I do carry kinetic ropes. The other option on the market, the downside to kinetic ropes is their cost. They're expensive. Some companies make what they call a snatch strap, not to be confused with a tree strap. This particular one is from ARB. They have about a 10 to 15% stretch to them. Okay, there is definitely a difference, 10 to 15% stretch versus 30% stretch. So keep that in mind. Straps also don't really have a governing body that kind of makes sure that they're rated appropriately, where all ropes, any type of rope or cordage, does have a governing body called the Cordage Institute. So keep that in mind. So snatch straps, quite a bit cheaper. You know, a good snatch strap from like ARB, anywhere from 60 to 80 bucks. But you're getting a lot more out of a kinetic rope, and you're going to get a lot more use out of it versus that kinetic rope, or sorry, versus that strap. So this is going to last a lot longer. Now, I've got a little RC here, and we're going to talk a little bit about rigging. So I've got my little Jeep here. It's got some bow shackles on the front of it. Let me adjust my camera a little bit so we can see everything. All right. So right here on the front, right? Most of the vehicles we use nowadays, straps do take up less place, Dan. That's exactly right. That's another reason to use straps. But recovery gear is not somewhere that I tend to skimp on. So just be careful with that. All right. So a lot of the recovery, or a lot of the vehicles we use nowadays, are ladder frames. Some are what we call unibody. What we mean by that is that there's two main frame rails that run the length of the vehicle, right? And they are separate from the body. A unibody, the frame rails are actually built into the body. But the most important thing I want you to take away is where those frame rails are located. Jeep does an amazing job. Dodge and some of those other companies do amazing jobs. They put awesome recovery points in line with those frame rails. Okay, they put them in line with those frame rails. Got a question from Cody. Recommended length for the kinetic rope. So 20 or 30 feet. I stick to 20 feet because I like a shorter one, but a 30-foot one you do get more stretch out of because it is a percentage. But a 20-foot one I can work in the woods a little bit easier with if I don't have much room. All right, so recovery points on the vehicle. Notice I've got two, one at the end of each frame rail. Newer vehicles have what they call crumple zones built into these frames. Whether if it's IFS or ladder frame, or not IFS, unibody or ladder frame, they still have crumple zones built into them. Oh, I got it from Al. All right. Pause for a moment. The weekly winner of the Spiderweb Trail Sack is Jeremy Lally, Lally. Al said he will contact you so that you can select a color. So the Trail Sack. Woo! All right. Good deal. Thanks, Al, for handling that for me. All right. So crumple zones are built into the frame. This is so if we get an impact, they will actually shrink and absorb that impact to keep us safe. How they fix that, if they are going to fix the vehicle, is they put it on a frame machine and hook it up, and they actually elongate the vehicle back out. Now, we're expecting these recovery points that are after the crumple zones on the outer portion of the frame to withstand hard pulls, right? So we can potentially elongate these crumple zones that are on the vehicles. This is why with newer vehicles, when we're doing rigging, we typically like to split the load between two recovery points. So we can do what we call a bridle, okay? Bill Fox, that sounds rigged. Congratulations, Jeremy. I wish it was rigged. I would have given myself a trail sack. I don't even have one of those. All right. So we want to do a bridle, okay, between the 2 points. What I mean by a bridle is that we're going to come off the front of this vehicle and triangulate to a central point, okay, like 2 straps, one coming off of each one, and then we can make the connection point with our kinetic rope. Our winch on the front is already using both frame rails because of the way our bumpers are mounted. Hopefully your bumper's mounted correctly. I've seen some sketchy ones out there. But the other thing is in the rear, our hitch is also coming off of both frame rails, okay? So super important to remember, trying to distribute that load between 2 frame rails. And this is where I only use, again, I don't go shorter than the 6-foot straps, because the further you go out, the better job it does of distributing that load. If you try to use a little short, like 3-foot strap, it actually ends up pulling more in than it does out. So try to use a longer strap, a minimum of 6 foot. So keep that in mind. But when we're doing rigging, especially kinetic recoveries, we want to hook up to 2 separate recovery points in the front, or we can hook up to the hitch in the rear. Very important. Awesome. So Jeremy was online. Very cool. Glad you're going to get one of those, man. So backing up, make sure that you're hooking up to both of them. All right. So I've got one more piece of kit, and then I'm going to talk about storing your gear here in just a moment. But one of the last pieces of kit that I will talk about, if you can see here, is traction boards. A lot of people, especially in the kind of trail ride world or rock crawling world, they don't really care much for traction boards, and that's understandable. It's something else extra that you have to carry. If you're more of the overlander type, or you use your vehicle for trips, long distance off-road, things like that, recovery boards are very good to carry. Not necessarily because they're always going to get you unstuck. They do a great job of doing that if used correctly. But what they can help with is definitely reducing the load when you're doing a recovery. Again, if I'm buried in mud or something like that, or I've got a winch up onto a ledge that has a rock face, or a rock face ledge that I'm winching up on, this can ramp it up for me so that I don't have to overcome that immense pull, right? And run the potential of damaging equipment. There's tons of traction mats out there on the market. Max Trax, Action Trax, ARB, that's about the top 3 that I recommend out there. I run the ARB ones currently, and so far I've been pretty pleased with them, but the Max Trax I've run in the past, they're very good as well. So keep that in mind. All right. So we're almost at that hour mark, but let's talk about storing our gear. With our gear that we are storing, a lot of people like to buy these airtight containers, like rigid boxes, things like that, and they're good. Absolutely nothing wrong with those, or our airtight waterproof bags. Make sure that if you're running that type of bags, that when you store your recovery equipment, you are letting it dry out first. I like these mesh bags. You can kind of see through them, right? Because they allow my recovery gear to dry out while they're in the bag. It also allows it to breathe. Again, remember what I said about mold and mildew degrading the fibers and causing you to lose strength. So don't store them when they're wet somewhere where they can mold and mildew, because then the next time you go to use it, it may not hold as well as you want it to. It could very much fail. So that's how I typically store my gear. But again, I still try to pull it out and dry it out so that it doesn't sit soaking wet. Just lay it out in the sun for a little bit, or on a hot sidewalk, and it will hold up just fine. All right, guys. So that's kind of the end of the presentation about recovery gear. We don't have Al online, but wow, it looks like we have 62 people on here. That's awesome. I want to personally thank everybody for tuning in. and checking out Southern Four Wheel Drive's TechNet session and listen to me kind of go on and on about all this stuff. But we've been right about an hour. So remember, guys, education, conservation, and recreation. Southern Four Wheel Drive's 3 main principles that they're focused on. We're very, very excited to be teaming up with them. I'm super excited to be the co-director of education and see where they go in the future. Make sure that if you come across somebody in the Southeast that's not a part of Southern Four Wheel Drive, invite them to join, right? It's a member-driven organization. Every little bit helps to carry it on. If you're more interested in what we do with Morrison's Outdoor Adventures, you can catch us on Facebook, Morrison's Outdoor Adventures, Instagram, Morrison's Outdoor Adventures, or we do have some YouTube videos up, Morrison's Outdoor Adventures again. But and our website, www.morrisonsoutdooradventures.com. You can read about how we live in an RV and travel all over the place. But again, thanks for having me. Thanks for listening to me drone on. And it looks like we've got Al back.
Mike, do you have a shirt, Mike? Do you sell shirts? Look at that.
And stickers and patches. You can order shirts are $25. Patches are $5 and stickers are $3. If you order a shirt, I will see if I can twist my wife's arm and get her to send you a free sticker, but we have all sizes. But you can send us a message on our Facebook page.
Awesome.
I like the shirts. I think they're pretty cool.
Awesome. Okay. Hey, Jeremy, congratulations. What we did, y'all, is everybody that commented last week during the live stream, we put their name in a list. 1 to let me see, 1 to 52. We had 52 people comment, and I used a random number generator to pick a number, and we got number 28, and Mr. Jeremy was number 28. Thank BFG. If you guys are around any of the BFG reps or anybody that sells BFG, tell them about what they're doing to help us put this TechNet on. Warren has also stepped up, and they came on board, and they're offering us. We're going to have some Warren giveaways. Not a winch yet, but we're going to have some other Warren giveaways as we go through this technical series. Awesome. I'm glad you brought in your support team. We saw them in the background with their little photo bombing.
Yeah.
Introduce them real quick.
So this is my oldest son, Steven here. He will be 11 soon. And this is my youngest son, Michael. They travel with us full time on the road, and they are little off-road demons. They love getting off-road, spending time on the trail, spending time outdoors, period. So,
okay.
We're just working on making another obstacle course.
And yeah, they're working on building my RC another obstacle course.
Hey, we saw that yesterday. That was really good. Next week we'll be at Clemson Four-Wheel Drive Center in their garage, and Cole Connor will be going over suspensions and drivetrains and all that neat stuff up underneath the vehicle. Mike, anything else?
That's all I got, sir.
All right, I'm going to sign off, y'all. Thank you.
Thank you.